Hello and thank you for joining us for another episode of Business PNG. Joining Editorial Manager of the PNG Report, Marco Venditti, in roundtable discussions about the importance of power for the socio-economic development of PNG, our guests Lesieli Taviri of Origin Energy, Clement Wayne, the Acting Secretary of the Department of Public Enterprises, and Tony Honey from PNG Forest Products.
Good evening and welcome back to the Oxford Business Group. Tonight we'll be talking about energy, specifically about power. And we have some very interesting guests as part of the show. I would like to introduce you to Clement Wayne. He's the Acting Secretary of the Department of Public Enterprises. We have Lesieli Taviri. She's the General Manager of Origin Energy in Papua New Guinea. And Tony Honey, the Managing Director of PNG Forest Products. Thank you very much for being part of the show tonight. Let's start by saying that Papua New Guinea is pretty much a blessed country. It has a lot of natural resources, plenty of oil, plenty of gas, plenty of hydropower, plenty of solar, plenty of wind, and plenty of everything. Nevertheless, this is a country that only 10% of the population has access to the grid, which is a bit of a paradox, obviously. And people from outside this country kind of struggle to understand the reason why. Clement, I would like to start with yourself, obviously representing the government, and the first question that I would like to ask you is what you think is the best solution to unlock the problem of Papua New Guinea. Without power, this country will never reach the goal that it has in its mind.
Yeah, it's simple. The first thing, as you said correctly, we have a lot of energy sources from hydro, geothermal. Hydro potential is probably 50,000 megawatts potential. Geothermal probably 10,000 megawatts possible. We probably have about 40 trillion cubic feet of gas. We have abundance of coal in the Papuan Gulf. We have in the Pacific Plains. We have in Finisterre Ranges, up in the Ramu Valley, also up in Eastern Islands. We've got huge abundance of coal in the country. And on top of that, we have solar, we have wind, we have biomass plants that we can burn for God knows how long. So there's a lot of energy sources that we have. And those that we don't know, the technologies that not around, we can use ocean, tidal basin, tidal wave and so on. So there's a huge potential. The problem is, as you said, rightly said from the introduction, how do you convert all these energy resources into electricity? And that's our challenge. It's our biggest challenge, and how we drive this economy in the country forward. We have right now about 3 million people living within 20 kilometers of the existing Ramu grid. 20 million people, 3 million people, that's about 1 million or so households. The simple, I think the solution is simple. It just requires political will to put down transformers and substations and get those power out. However, we have a deficiency also in the generation space. There's not enough power to go along those transmission lines and this distribution and then the grid. So what is needed now is to address the generation space, the gap that's existing right now. The installed capacity in the country is about 580 megawatts. PNG Power owns about 380 of those, and the private sector is generating about 200 megawatts. So we need to now unlock and come up with or encourage private sector to come on board in the generation space to allow for the increase in generation. During the emergency period, the cabinet approved about 1,655 megawatts of additional capacity or additional installations. It's being approved. What is needed now is for those projects that have been approved to move towards feasibility, advanced feasibility, go towards all the design stages and all of those things, financing and all of those, in order to get these projects up and running in the next 5 years or next 10 years.
I see.
And also at the same time, we're also addressing the transmission space, transmission projects. We've just approved for China Exim Bank funded project to come to get the 5 megawatts that's being freed up by oil shoots in Heights to be brought to Tari, and then from Tari to the Ramu grid through Mount Dagana 132 kV line. Just last weekend, I was traveling with the Korean team feasibility study that carried out from Kundiawa. We drove through Mondia Pass, through Bundi and into Medaing to get that transmission going so that it can feed. Excuse me, we're still a problem.
That's when you almost got lost in the bush, apparently.
Yeah, it was just a tough drive down the road. So we went through to feed the power, provide the power to Yanera and to Kurmikari mines. They need about 200 megawatts of power. So that needs to be freed up. But then that project still needs, more generation to come on.
Before we go too far with that, I think if we can extrapolate what you're saying is at the end of the day, here you need an effort that is together between the government as well as the private sector. So we have two representatives here of the private sector, so we should hear from them as well. Lesieli, whenever there is a problem, there is always sort of a short-term solution, a long-term solution. When we look at what we just mentioned at the beginning, a country blessed with natural resources still can't reach the people. So on the immediate run, what can be done in PNG to get, especially people in rural areas, connected to some sort of form of power?
Look, I think there's great potential for solar in particular, and my business has just recently, we've been retailing with other businesses as well, entry-level lights, that vary from as basic as 72 lumens, which can light up a small room, to slightly bigger home systems. And it's a solution that's immediate, it's a solution that's affordable, and at the end of the day, it's about the consumers and how much they can afford to actually pay for power. And so solar is free energy from the sun. And so, if we're able to, and it's becoming a really competitive market as well, solar, there's new technologies that are being introduced, better storage systems. So if we could use those technologies to solve the immediate challenges and make it affordable for people so they're able to access it, so that they can have some form of energy to be able to engage into productive activity. I mean, that's where the private sector comes in, to be able to fill that gap immediately.
Okay, but the present legislation, would you say that they encourage that sort of development happening, when it comes to that short-term measure that you just mentioned?
Well, solar is, from my understanding, right now where solar is readily available, there's nothing stopping people from purchasing solar. And entry-level lights. That's why I said it's an immediate solution. It's one that's available that people can buy. When you look at other more complex solar systems, for example, PV systems, which are on-grid systems, it becomes a little bit more complex because that's integrating with the grid, and that's where the regulatory framework comes in and all of that.
Even for mini grids, for instance, that's something that will affect that. Mini grids?
Well, it depends on what the current regulatory framework is. I believe anything within 10-kilometre radius, I think, is exclusive to PNG Power.
Yes.
So if you're looking at off-grid beyond that, then there's no stopping you from being able to develop other energy solutions.
Clement, is there any signs that the government is actually taking that in consideration?
We have an energy policy and an national energy plan that should address all those issues. It's just need to be adopted by cabinet. We're working through we're going through the final leg of consultation with our stakeholders. And,
okay.
The
I'll get back to you on that because that's a very important question. I want to bring Tony Hon into the discussion here because your company basically has been active in producing power since 1927, I believe, even though it was with a different name. So you have a long experience in PNG when it comes to producing power, hydropower specifically. You're running a power station. You're about, I think, to finalize the next project coming on stream. So how much is important, would you say, within the energy mix, hydropower? I mean, the potential are great, but really we haven't seen that much happening when it comes to PPPs, the famous public private partnerships.
Well, obviously there's a lot of potential in PNG. It's hydropower would have to be untapped. But of course it's a high capital cost to engage this type of business. But for us, it's a business we're familiar with. Like you said, we've been around for a long time. We've recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, opened a new power station. That's running quite well. We're now in the throes of coming to agreement with PNG Power in terms of a purchase agreement for another station that hopefully we'll get across the line in the next couple of months. But they're sort of long-term projects that take a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. But certainly, I think there's a lot more potential for smaller scale hydropower stations, perhaps more in our area, but there are a lot of other areas in PNG where you certainly could be putting smaller stations in with agreement with the state. I think one of the issues that we're finding when it comes to the private partnership in terms of dealing with a third party is that there are still some obstacles in the way, particularly reticulation, how that's managed. That hasn't been sorted out yet, but once that's sorted out, I think there's potential to move into more third-party type relationships with power.
PNG Power, from what I understand, it spends as much as 340 million kinas every year in purchasing diesel. That's an absurd amount of money, especially considering that this is a country that it's a net exporter of natural gas. You think that money obviously could be spent completely in a different way, much more importantly for this country. Where do you think that the money could be allocated? Biodiesel.
Produce more biodiesel, 300 million kina coconuts, farmers will be better off. And you have a diesel. It's,
right.
You know, organically.
That also is connected to the whole issues of domestic obligations. I mean, there are different views on that, but out of the first PNG LNG project, there was no domestic obligations. Many people think that was a total oversight from the government side. Tony, what do you think about that?
Well, I was actually flabbergasted. I would have thought that would have been one of the first things that they would have contemplated. It's a spin-off from natural gas. It's a common sense thing to put a 100 megawatt or 200 megawatt power station out there. But you know, I don't know the rationale behind it all. I don't know what the agreements were all about. But I would have thought it would have made sense. And I think in recent times they've put a plant out there. I don't know how many megawatt, 10 megawatt, 25 megawatt just recently. Well, perhaps it could have been done sooner. It could have been a larger plant.
It kind of felt like a second thought.
Yeah, well, it would seem that way, but there might have been complications in the agreements. I don't know, but to me it would have been one of the fundamental, I would have thought one of the fundamental things that made part of that agreement.
It could have solved, you think, on the short to medium run, some of the power problems?
Certainly would resolve some of the power problems that you have in Port Moresby, in the immediate area, and allow for expansion at the same time. You seem to be sort of limited to hydro power around Port Moresby, although I think there's something potentially happening at the Brown River somewhere out there, but it certainly would resolve the power issue in the short term, most definitely. I would have thought.
Everybody, I think, did. But Clement, I think you have a slightly different opinion.
Well, I agree with what Tony just said. You know, in hindsight, the domestic market obligations should have been considered, and power should have been provided through the gas. That didn't happen. But now we've got Narrow Brown, which is a private sector initiative. It's by the World Bank and the Kumul Controller Holdings, what was formerly IPPC. We have downstream from there, we have Edevu, which is a private sector initiative, and that's probably going to generate about 50 megawatts of power. So it will be available in the next, which is approved last week. Yesterday I met with them for the PPA to be finalized. And they'll be signing, I think, next week or so. Sort of construction is probably, this is the only project that's shovel ready anywhere in the country, besides what he has already delivered. And that's the same guy that I think Alan Go, that's involved with your project, is now doing that project. So we expect that to be delivered in the next 3 years, and we'll have that power. Now, looking back, what we need is more hydro. I always have the view that the gas that we have is premium gas. So we just need to export it at a high price and get the money and then build all the hydropowers. In the short term, yes, I agree with what Tony said. But in the long term, there are other sources of gas that are available globally, which we should be able to source them cheaper than what we have. Because what we have is more expensive, more premium. So, you look at the gas composition for coming out of Heights, it's about 96% methane, and for less than 4% ethane and other chemicals or other gas. You look at the U.S. shale gas; it's got like 60% methane and 40% ethane. And ethane stockpile while in U.S. exceeds its storage capacity, so we should be importing those things. It's just geopolitically it makes sense. And it makes sense business-wise, anyway, commercial sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the case as well. There's got to be a clear business case. It's got to be economical. Reticulation systems for LNG are quite expensive, intense capital systems. At the end of the day, it's about making electricity affordable for people, and getting your return, I suppose, on the investment you make on such big systems like that. 25 megawatts, I don't know whether you'll get that type of, whether it's economically feasible to have that kind of investment for LNG. So.
But where do you stand on that issue, on domestic obligation? Tony said, it should have made sense to have it. You say, I think we should just export the gas. But what do you say?
Naturally, I think, I'm of the same view as well. I'm of the same
Which
view as
view?
well, naturally, which is that, it should have been part of the negotiation. It doesn't make sense to export all this gas and not have any domestically. But again, like I said, it's looking at the economics of it at the end of the day. So.
Can it be that the government at that time was thinking really long terms, because those were the really good years of the oil price, and that perhaps when the oil...
Probably. Yeah,
there's some of
probably.
that, I think. No?
Probably they were thinking long term. And the oil price was pretty high, and everything was back to the oil price. They thought they'll get a lot of money.
So now we're
So-
looking at more short to medium term, and I think because the country is getting a little bit desperate when it comes to power, isn't it? Lesieli?
the short term, yes.
Lesieli, you feel that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Look,
it's certainly a
it's
short-term solution.
Yeah, there are several short-term solutions that I think should be looked at quite immediately, and that's, I suppose, private sector have a really big role to play there. And I suppose it's a clear business case for us. You get access to, people have more access to power, they can engage in more activities, it just stimulates the economy, it builds demand for services and products from business houses. It's really impeding on progress, to be honest. So, so it's really critical.
Absolutely, for human development, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And this is what the country has to look like on the long run, obviously. Well, I think out of this discussion is sort of coming out clear that here it takes all kinds. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of cooperation between the government and private sector. It takes all forms of energy really to kick in at the same time to support the economic and industrialization of Papua New Guinea. But history at the end of the day is made by the initiatives that are actually implemented. And many times we've seen in Papua New Guinea a lot of discussion and not enough implementation. Do you think that this is going to be the case as well? And do you feel that this administration really is strongly behind the sector that perhaps is the most important for the socio-economic development of Papua New Guinea? I would like to have three last remarks from the three of you on this specific question, starting with you.
I think we have all the legislations to promote or harness all the energy sources we have. Regulatory needs to be fine-tuned in some areas. I think this government is very proactive. The Prime Minister went to Edavu on a Saturday, and my Minister Ben Maki went to Edavu to promote this private sector initiative in the generation space. And we've approved 1,655 megawatts of additional generation space. We've looked at two transmission projects now funded, and the JICA one makes 3, and ADB funded projects as well. So I think there is a lot of support now from this government, this cabinet, to see the generation space, the transmission, and actually the entire electricity, reach out to the bulk of the population. So I think there's political will there. But I just want to have one caveat. I want the MPs to put the 2 million kina on these substations and the transmission lines along the corridor, Ramu corridor.
Gotcha. Tony, the government is saying we're doing well. We're proposing a lot of good initiatives to bring into the market. Do you see that political will being translated into practical measures on the ground from the private sector point of view?
No, I think it could be improved immensely. I think it's, I don't know the mechanics of it all, but by and large, we are finding it slow. We've been trying to negotiate agreement with PNG Power for nearly over 12 months now, and I think we're drawing to a conclusion shortly. And there's been best efforts by several organisations, including IPVC, but we just still haven't got it across the line. So where it's being held up is beyond us, so we don't know. But we've told many times sort of conflicting stories, but hopefully for more reports. In recent times we're getting very close to getting it across the line, but it could be a lot better. It's not a difficult thing to negotiate. We have one agreement previously. It was I would have thought, a very, very simple thing to process, but it just hasn't proved to be the case.
Timing remains an issue in PNG.
It just takes a long time, and I just don't know why, especially when you have one case that's already been done, it's been proven successful, it works. I don't know.
It should be easier.
It should be, and could be a lot easier.
And business can't wait.
Well, they
Isn't
can't.
it,
You
Lesieli?
miss opportunity. I mean, like there's a slowing down of the economy right now. Probably an ideal time for us to build a power station. People are a little bit more desperate for work. The cost base will be lower, but we have the Total LNG
coming on stream soon.
Looming, and of course that's going to escalate costs. So it's an opportune moment. I'd like to do it now, but the process of building a power station takes several years. So
that's an interesting point you're saying, because prices will escalate as we've seen in the past with Exxon.
Absolutely.
So that's the time to actually implement them.
Absolutely. So we can go into a feasibility study and we'll look at it, but maybe the cost of building the power station will be prohibitive, and we may have to go and renegotiate a rate if you wanted to go further. So, you know, time is of the essence. We should move a lot faster than what we do, because it is not difficult. I don't believe.
Lesieli,
in our case.
Do you feel the government is getting this sense of urgency around it?
Look, like Tony, I think it could be improved, and I think you know, definitely different sectors of the community are starting to realise that, you know, this is a serious issue, and they're jumping up and down and trying to push as much as they can, I suppose. But it is an area that needs to be improved. Like I said, at the end of the day, we are private sector implementers, but the policy makers have to lead the way, so that we can be able to implement. So.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you. Clement, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tony and Lesieli. So, hope to see you again on the show, and let's say that this is only the first episode of a long series of discussion around energy and power, because I really feel that this is the key sector for the socio-economic growth of Papua New Guinea. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, for following the show, and we'll see you shortly on this channel again. Thank you very much.